This week's question comes from viewer Eric A. The question's long and convoluted, so I'm going to read it in full. How does a parent come to the conclusion or rationalize lying to their child by telling them about Santa, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, etc., and then in turn expect the child to uphold to a morale standard not afforded to the child in the first place? So where do parents get off? Is it the pressures of society, or for nostalgic purposes, or is there some benefit to telling a child these lies? What is it? The questioner clearly feels betrayed. The personal injury experienced by the questioner is so prominent in the wording of the question that it becomes impossible to filter out the relevant philosophical questions from their personal feelings. And so I thought it was appropriate to do kind of a psychoanalysis of the viewer, because there's a certain kind of fundamentalism in what I'm calling a fundamentalism in their phrasing, because when the word lie, to say you're lying to someone, that implies normally when a parent convinces their child about Santa Claus, no one thinks of that as a lie. It's just more of like, a happy fantasy. It's happy. Most children are glad that their parents help them believe in Santa Claus. Like, it's like a magical world that it's like at a certain age, it's good to believe in magic. And to be denied that on account of an ethical assumption that one is lying, or that they would be lying and lying is wrong, and therefore we will not allow these children to live in like a fantasy world. I think most parents, I'm not a parent, but most parents would understand that that's a good thing. That's good to let them live in that world.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm helping Zach here, editing here. And I just want to say, what Zach's trying to say and failing miserably is fiction is not lies, because we use fiction to pique your interest in something that's true. Instead of just saying something like, life is a miserable, pointless, meaningless thing, you write a book, that's really cool and interesting to read. At the end, you're kind of like, life is kind of a meaningless, boring, weird thing. Maybe, maybe. But more likely you're probably going to be like, wow, that shiny gun was really fun. So I think it's kind of stupid. But anyway, fiction is a tool we use to teach people things that they normally wouldn't really know. Whether it's effective or not is probably up to you to decide.
How does the questioner arrive at the questioner's personal kind of unusual attitude towards it? So what I've done is created a PowerPoint presentation, one of my famous PowerPoint presentations. So this is how the ethical system plays out for the questioner. There is a conflation, if you will, of ethical and true. They must go together in the questioner's mind. and unethical and false must always go together. I would suggest I would suggest thinking of the two as independent variables, where just ethical and unethical is not the same as true and false, and they vary independently. So basically, you get Santa would be in this quadrant, and other things would be in other quadrants. What kind of emotional experiences create this a dogmatic principle in the mind of an adult? Because this kind of dogma is what I'm calling a kind of fundamentalism. And most people would easily realize that this was more accurate, that unethical and ethical are different from true and false. But what kind of mindset forces these two to be the same? And it's the kind of mindset that... So I have another chart here, in which here is your fundamentalist idea that forces these four things to be on these two things to be together, and these two things, and then but like what's happening is that the mind is consciously, how do I say it? Is that in order for the mind, some other kind of consciousness is developing separately from these elements. And in order for that this consciousness to develop, the mind has to force these things into a dogmatic kind of fundamentalist framework, because the human consciousness somehow is not able to develop without narrowing itself somehow first. So this narrowing has to occur in order for this unknown, what I'm calling shadow element, to develop its consciousness more fully. And this principle explains strong divides in general, where people strongly develop positions on one side or the other of a given topic. It's because, whether it's Enlightenment and rationalism, like in this case, the questioner's fundamentalism is what you call an Enlightenment rationalism fundamentalism, which reached its pinnacle during the French Revolution. But we know all sorts of other kinds of fundamentalism too, and essentially psychologically, my claim is that the human mind needs to create this continuum, create a dogmatic fundamentalist continuum in order for it to develop some other element that is actually more important than this. And we don't necessarily know what that is. It's unconscious until it becomes conscious.
Reminds me of an old story I used to hear. Well, the unconscious mind creates a reality which we must accept or face the inevitable destruction of ourselves.
Unconscious until it becomes conscious. Unconscious until it becomes conscious. Unconscious until it becomes conscious.